Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of So Chatty. This is episode 35 for November the 19th, 2021. And today we're just going to bat around some ideas. Not that we really intend to do this, and what I'm talking about is start a business. But the reason we're bringing it up is because, well, for me, I have a lot of quilts that are just sitting around doing nothing. I have quilts on a bed. A guest bedroom has about 12 quilts on it. I've got quilts folded up on chairs. I've got quilts over chairs. I've got quilts on a quilt ladder. I have a lot of quilts and a lot of other things that I've made. And, you know, for me, making these kind of things, it's more or less the journey. Once I'm done, I'm done. But I haven't really given many things away. So I've had a few people approach me over time and ask me if I would be willing to sell my quilts or do commissions or things like that.
Or just things where they say, well, you should sell your quilt.
Yeah, just general things. And we have thoughts about this, but I don't want to just talk about quilting. I want to talk about what Walter does, garment making, because there are many people that have home businesses where they do things like alterations for people or do custom clothing designs or something like that as well. So, you know, if you have the ability, this might be something you might consider, and many people do. But is it right for us? So we're just going to throw ideas back and forth about this and kind of think about, well, let's seriously think about this. Could we actually start a viable business? So let's start with the idea of giving away a quilt or a garment, a shirt, or a bag or something. I'm thinking of the things that you make. Or selling them. So let's talk about how many things we've given away. So how many things have you given away?
I've not only given away a few things, like last year we gave next door neighbor a bag, right, that I made. I gave away a few bags that I made, you know, those purses that I made for, I gave one to my sister. And
oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what else have I given? I made a wine bag for Brendan when I went over to his house, and I gave him that with some wine in it. And
you give me a shirt, a couple of shirts.
I've made shirts for you,
but that's not really giving them. More or less, I said I wanted them.
Basically, I think all that I've really given away.
Well, to date, I've only really given away, in terms of quilts, I've only given away really 2 quilts. And one quilt was, I actually was commissioned to make the quilt, but it was for a very good friend. And I said, no. I said, you want a quilt? I'll make you a quilt. And I knew this person's style, and I've mentioned this in the Idiot Quilter this past week, that essentially he wanted something to drape over his couch in his living room, and he is a collector of Victorian antiques, and he loves anything that's sort of on that line. And I had a kit. And the kit I had bought probably a year before, or maybe longer than that, and I hadn't got around to doing it, so it gave me the impetus to get this kit out and do it. And it was done in Tim Holtz Fabrics, and Tim Holtz Fabrics, as you know, are all very antique-y, grungy, that kind of thing with them. And that was right up this friend of ours' alley, so I knew he was going to like it. And it was a pattern that I had never done before as well. It was a herringbone kind of a thing. And it turned out pretty good. But it was a gift. I gave it to him. I did not take any money for it or anything like that. He offered again to pay for it.
Well, he did come over and give us a bunch of bottles of wine.
Well, true. So. Yeah, a lot of wine, actually, for that. So we'll work for wine. But it was a friend. And I would feel funny about charging a friend for a quilt. You know, kind of a thing.
Especially as somebody that's a really good friend.
Yeah.
I mean, acquaintance maybe.
Yeah. So, and the other quilt I gave away was actually, it was funny because Walter's brother-in-law had, out of the goodness of his heart, had said to his son, Walter's nephew, so I guess they were getting a new bed or something. They were talking about wanted a new bedspread or something like that for it. And he said to them, well, Steve would make you a quilt. Well, I don't like being volunteered for for these kind of things.
yeah.
But I mean, I would. I mean, if they had turned around and asked me and said, you know, would you make us a quilt for it? I would have said, sure, no problem. I would have done that. So it's not a big deal. But I had 3 quilts that I thought would be suitable. And I took pictures of each because at the height of COVID when this happened, of course. And I sent them the pictures and said, you know, pick one. Of course, they picked the one that I liked the best out of the 3. But having said that, you know, then if I didn't want them to pick it, why would I send them a picture of it? But anyways, they took that one, and that was great. And I guess, well, I asked them to send me a picture of it when they got it on their new bed or whatever. That was a while ago. I haven't seen that picture yet, so I don't know. But, you know, someone said to me once, I'd heard, once you give a quilt away, it's no longer your quilt. Mm-hmm. So give it up, kind of a thing. And they were kind of referring to people who give quilts away and they end up as a dog's bed. And yeah, no, you don't want to see that happen. But those are the only 2 quilts I've given away. Now, I've given other things away. I have given away table runners that I have made, quick ones, and Christmas bag, and I forget, I made some embroidery things in that over the last couple of years for the neighbors next door at Christmas time and that kind of stuff. I do truly like making things and giving them to people, but when you think about a quilt, like small things like a table runner, placemats, an embroidered angel or something like that, Christmas tree decoration, you don't put a lot of time into those kind of things, but when you do a quilt, you're putting a lot of time into that. And this would be the same with a garment.
Yeah, see, for me, I can't see, other than making garment for you, I can't really see making garments for other people for me.
Well, it'd be sizing for
one
problem.
Part of it's sizing, and you know, like I'm still not very good at adjusting a pattern to fit somebody or something. So I'm uncomfortable doing something like a custom size or something like that right now. And there are areas of something that I have to be motivated to do. So like I'm not somebody like Steve that turns out stuff left, right, and center. I sort of do it at my own pace, and I tend to do it kind of slow. And I would never make any money out of it if I were to sell the clothes. And I'm not sure if I'm really that motivated into making something specific for somebody else. I'll make something specific for myself because I know I'm going to be wearing it, right? But I don't really want to make something for somebody else and have them wear it.
Well, it puts pressure on you. Because if you're...
And not only that, if I make a mistake on the garment that I'm making for myself, well, either I put up with a mistake or I put it in the corner and not wear it type of thing, right? But I'm not comfortable making something for somebody else, especially for payment.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the way I am with a quilt. It's one thing. Well, first of all, making a quilt for somebody else, I'm going to be extra careful and with it all, and I'd be so afraid that there would be even the tiniest mistake in it. And we all know as quilters, there's no such thing as the absolutely perfect quilt. Even the ones who put them in shows, they have their trials and tribulations too when they're making it. So, you know, there's always going to be a small error or oops in the quilt you make. But if the person isn't a quilter themselves, and if you don't point it out to them, they're never going to know. But I think that would be different with garments because, you know, if you make one arm too long, longer than the other, that's going to be very noticeable. Or if you've got some bad stitching in a collar or, you know, in the...
You know, I've had trouble putting sleeves in and stuff like that. And it has imperfections in it when it's on my garment, but it's my garment. So if I have a few imperfections on it, it's my fault. But if I were making something for somebody else, I would want it to be perfect.
Yeah. And I mean, and then there's a level here. If you're making it as a gift, and if it's a small little oops, you might decide to point that out to somebody, say, I made a little mistake here, at least in a quilt, I would. I think in a garment, again, a little oops might be a much more major oops than on a quilt. But I would probably say to them, I had a little problem down here, but it's not going to affect, the quilt. No one's ever going to notice that or something like that. Or I just don't say anything to
Like
them.
I'm okay with making something for Steve.
Yeah,
That's
it
not a
doesn't matter if he
problem.
makes me something that's ugly.
But that's
Yeah.
not
Hey, give me your mistakes.
no, I know, but I mean it's not the same as giving it to somebody else, right?
Yeah. Well, let's face it. When you give something to somebody else, whether they're paying for it or you're giving it to them as a gift, you want it to be as perfect as it possibly can be. Especially because you don't want, it's a reflection on you. Okay? And it's very easy to impress non-sewers if you don't point out mistakes or things, because if they can't do it, they think, wow, this is really impressive. But if you're going to give it to somebody that might be very picky about it, well, that makes it more nervous. And if you know that you're making this for somebody and they're really picky or that kind of thing, I think that's when you might make more mistakes because you're going to be uptight. I would be in the quilt. I'd be so and then it doesn't become fun. Then it's stress. Right?
And as far as alterations are concerned, like I said, I'm not real great. I haven't really perfected sizing or anything yet. So alterations I'm not interested in. Hemming pants.
Yeah, you get a lot of people that don't know how to hem.
When I'm finishing a garment, the parts that I don't like doing is the actual finishing the hems and things like that. So why would I want to do it for somebody else?
Yeah. Well, there are people who do it, but there are people that have done it so often they can zip off a hem literally in minutes.
And have it look pretty good.
And have it look good. Like I learned how to hem pants by hand back when I went to university because my mother showed me how because she always hemmed my pants for me and she figured this is something I probably should need to know. So I learned that, but I haven't hemmed a pair of pants in 1,000 years. In fact, the last pair of pants I actually hemmed on the sewing machine.
Yeah, so for clothing, considering clothing, I'm not really that keen on doing that. If somebody wanted, if I made bags before where I've given somebody a bag, I might do a bag. I'd be more comfortable doing a bag for somebody.
Well, you've done a lot of bags, so you've got that down pat with it.
Well, I've done a lot of bags, but just more or less one design.
Yeah, right? Well, that's what I mean. But you got it down, and you can rattle those off pretty fast. Yeah. But there's something else too. A person wouldn't expect in a bag, in a tote bag, even though your tote bags are very elaborate because you put the embroidery on them and the whole bit with them. But they wouldn't expect the perfection in a bag that they would expect in, say, a shirt or a pair of pants.
Yeah, that's true.
It. Because, a bag is a bag, right? So...
But yeah, it's even that. I'm not that comfortable about. It'd have to be a special friend for me to make something like that, a bag or something.
Well, yeah, well, that's the way I feel about making quilts.
Or I don't mind, last year I made something for the neighbors and stuff, and it was more of a sort of a friendly gift for somebody, and I figure if they're not paying you for it, they can't be.
Well, that's the other thing too.
They don't have to. They don't. I'm not expecting things to be perfect.
No.
Perfect.
But let's go into the imaginary land here of a business, an idea for a business. If we were thinking about having a business, okay, first thing that you have to come to mind is if you're going to go into this as a business, you want to make money. You want to make a profit. So how do you price what you're going to make? Well, of course, basically, you'd have to figure out how much it's costing you in materials. That's the base, but you're going to charge them more than that. Well, how much is your time worth? With a quilt, depending on the size of the quilt and the complexity of the pattern, it could take me... I am a fast quilter, but I'm not... It depends on the pattern, how complicated it is. Like that one I'm making now in that class, that Lone Star. Holy crap. What would I charge somebody if I was going to make them one of those? Well, first of all, I wouldn't make one of those for anybody because... Maybe if I had more practice with that kind of thing, but it's a fairly complex pattern, and the fabric that goes into it isn't really all that expensive, but it's the time and effort on that one. So I have no idea what you would charge. And how would you work it out? Would you charge it as an hourly rate? Like, then you'd have to keep track of how long it takes you to make it.
I mean, if I sit down and figure out how many hours it takes me to make a shirt, even a short sleeve shirt right now, I can do quicker because I've done it.
It's less
times,
sleeves,
right? Yeah,
you don't have cuffs. So
yeah, I know. Short sleeves a little easier because you don't have all the cuffs and stuff like that to do. But if you figure out your material and then you figure out your time,
it's
and
an expensive
it actually
shirt.
does take a fair bit of time to do, especially if you're not really you're not sweat shop and you can just rip them off, right? And by the time you add your materials and your time, it can become a very expensive shirt.
Yeah.
And so probably what I'd have to be discounting on is my how much money I'm taking for my effort.
Yeah.
Right. And probably the amount of money I would get for my effort to make a shirt to be able for somebody to maybe want to buy the thing. I wouldn't get enough profit out of it.
No.
And my time is important to me, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like I don't really need the extra cash. I have enough of a pension and I have enough savings and stuff to keep me going for a while, right? So it's not like I really need to make the extra income, right? So for me to do that as a business, I don't really think that I enjoy the sewing enough to make it into a business.
Well, the thing is, once you make anything into a business, when it becomes your job, there goes the fun.
Right. It doesn't become fun for me anymore.
No.
If it becomes stressful and I have to rattle off so many projects in a certain amount of time. Like, I mean, people go to these Christmas shows right now and they'll have made all these items for sale for Christmas, right? And the amount of effort to take to produce all these items that they have to bring to these Christmas shows and then try and sell them and things like that. See, like, there was a lady that I used to do stained glass with, and she decided to. Are you okay with me saying this?
Yeah. That's fine.
And she decided to make these. She made these beautiful ornaments, and they were quite a process because she had to cut the glass and solder them all together and make them, and then she would send them off to a special nickel plater so that they become a nice shiny color and everything like that. Well, she wanted to sell these for about $35 a piece, and even then she was only making about $5 after all of her effort and everything else on each item. And nobody wanted to buy them because they were too expensive.
And it's price point. And you see that people think, especially like craft fairs and things like that. I mean, I saw those ornaments. They were beautiful. And I think they were well worth more than $35. But I know, because of your experience with doing stained glass, I know how much time and effort goes into making those, not to mention how much it costs for the materials and everything. But people, because it's handmade, they think they should be getting it cheaper. So, like, for example, if you were to make one of your shirts, and one of your shirts costs how much in fabric alone?
Well, approximately.
Well, you're buying 3 meters of fabric.
Yeah, I know. I for a short sleeve shirt, actually, I'd probably only need about 2.5 meters, but still, that's even at $15 a meter is.
Well, it's $40.
It's about $40 in material,
and that's because you're getting your fabric too. You're using quilting cotton from Shirley, who has a really good price on what she charges.
I know the average price for quilting cotton is about $20 a meter.
Yeah, so you're talking anywhere from $40 to $50 to $60.
Yeah, $50 to $60 just on material. Then there's your thread, and then there's your
buttons,
your interfacing.
Oh yeah, buttons, interfacing. Forgot about that.
Right, and
so now you're talking $80-$90.
Yeah,
in just in materials, right?
Yeah, I'd say for materials alone for a shirt, it's about, if it's like $50 for the fabric, maybe it's another $5 for extra things if you use inexpensive
Mm-hmm.
other things. So,
But then that also brings up an interesting point too. Quality. If you want to maximize profit, you have to get a good deal on all of your raw materials for it. And we all know why manufacturers have everything made in China.
yeah, see, and I'm buying fabric at retail price, right? I'm not
Yeah, you're
buying
not buying it
fabric at
wholesale.
wholesale price. Like if I owned a fabric store or something like that and can purchase everything, or if I'm making huge quantities of something where I could be able to purchase stuff wholesale,
Like if you had a vendor's license.
it might be a little bit better for fabric, but I have to buy everything retail, so that costs money. So what do I charge more for my efforts to produce a shirt?
Now, if you were a big name, it was, shirts by Wally or something like that. People will pay those
Yeah, I
prices.
know if I could,
becomes
if
designer.
I could make them and have Nordstrom sell them.
Yeah. Well, then, but you wouldn't be able to make the quantities that
No.
Nordstrom would want, or any of those other stores for
Yeah.
selling. So, I mean, that's what I mean. There's no way, and people aren't going to pay for that. But if it's a quilt, okay, same thing. I never really sat down and thought about how much I'm paying just for the fabric for the average quilt. But to make a large, like a full-size quilt or a queen-size quilt, I'm using, well, if you count backing in there, I'm using probably 6 to 10 meters of fabric for that. So at an average of $20 a meter, I mean, I pay $15 a meter with Shirley, but I mean, I don't always buy all my fabric from Ultimate Sewing. I go some other places and they're more expensive because it depends on what I'm looking for, what I want. So let's just say, for math, $20, say 6 meters of fabric for a large quilt. That's what, $120 just for fabric. Then you've got thread on that, and you've got batting too, and batting is.
Are you including 6 meters? Are you including your backing as well?
Yeah, and that's not like it could be more than that.
Yeah,
because it depends on how big the quilt is and what the design is and all of that. So you've got all of that to put into it. So right there, you're not going to be able to buy a quilt for under $100. Not a full size quilt. Maybe a throw. A very simple throw, like something as a 4-patch or a 9-patch, something like that. With it, a baby quilt, maybe. But then you got to add your time, as we were saying before, to it. So people go, and I've heard them say this, they'll look at a quilt and they'll see a price tag on it of $900. And they'll go, $900? I'd never pay $900 for a quilt. Well, okay, then you're not a quilt person. Then you
you're not a sewer.
You're not a sewer. You don't get it. You can't get a quilt for $100.
See, because those people are thinking, oh, I can go to Walmart and buy a bed in a bag for $100.
So go to Walmart and buy bed in a bag because you're not going to get a quilt.
And that's what they're thinking of, right? They're not thinking of unless there are some people that do value the actual cost of it, but those people also know the effort and everything else that goes into making one of these things. So,
but the average person doesn't have a clue. They see a quilt and they think, "Oh, I'd really like to have one of those one day." Then they see the price tag, $500, and they gasp.
500, 600.
Well, how can they charge that? That must be because, and they're probably not making a hell of a lot of money on that quilt, making that and selling it at that price. That would be a cheap quilt, like if it was a full size quilt with it. So yeah. So that takes us to, there's something else that you brought up there for a moment ago, and I was going to comment on that, and I forgot what it was. Well, we were talking about how we would price what we make.
Well, luckily, if I were to sell bags or something, I would have to create an inventory of stuff. If you were going to a show and selling it, right? But I meant, if somebody came to me individually and say, "Oh, Walter, can you make this bag for me? I'd really like this bag." And depending on who the person was, if it was my sister, I'd probably just make it for her and give it to her, right? But I mean, if it's somebody that I don't know very well or something like that, I'm not as motivated to make for something for somebody that I don't know.
Yeah,
because to me, the effort isn't worth it for me to do it. If it's somebody I know and it's something they really want, then I have a tendency more to be more in tune to making something to please them, to make them to make it good for them. So if it's a relative or if it's a really good friend or something like that, I'd be very motivated to make something for them, and I might just do it at cost or even take even a slight loss or whatever at it, just so that it's something for me to do and something that they would like.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, that I lost my train of thought, and it was the same thought I lost my train of thought on before too, right off, because you just keep talking. Oh, you said like for somebody or whatever. Now I can't. Oh, yeah. Okay, don't say anything. You'll take me off my thought here. The reason I got thinking about this topic in the first place, a couple of reasons, but one very recent reason is because a friend of mine on Facebook had seen one of my latest quilts, one of my Christmas quilts. I had posted a picture of it. And she says, she says, would you sell your quilts? Meaning, I gathered that she would like to buy one. And she's a good friend. So I said, well, let me put it this way. I said, if you tell me the colors that you like, and if you tell me what it's going to be used for. Do you want it on a bed? Do you want a wall hanging style? Do you want to throw something like that? And if you do a search on Google and find a variety of patterns that you like and give me the links to them, then we can talk about what you want. It would probably be easier to say to her, come on over, take a look at what I've got here, and we can talk about, which one you might like. But then I was thinking in my head, well, she's a friend. So I'm not going to try to profit off a friend. I mean, she'd be very willing to pay for it because she does have a good idea of how much work goes into something like this. But she's a good friend. So what would I charge her? I might say, well, I'll only charge you for the fabric, what it costs me for the fabric on it, that kind of a thing. Or I would probably more or less just go, yeah, I'll just make you one. That's fine. Don't worry about it. It's a gift, kind of a thing. Because like Walter said, if it's a really good friend or it's a family member,
then it isn't work. It's a
labor of love.
Yeah, it's something that you're looking forward to giving to them so that they
love you even more.
Yeah, like it's not the same. If I go to sell a bag to somebody, a stranger that I don't know, right? There's no connection.
And that's, again, where the fact is, if you're going to sell it to a stranger, then you have to figure out your price and the whole bit because you don't want to be screwed.
And then it goes back to...
It has to be perfect, and it's creating stress and all that kind of stuff.
And it also goes back to, then I'm going to hate doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because what I'm doing it as a hobby for myself to keep myself busy or for an added interest or whatever. But I'm not doing it for necessarily to make a profit from it.
But I think there's another reason why you see so many people that have Etsy stores, or they go to those craft fairs and things like that, and they may spend from one craft fair to the next craft fair the next year making all of their stuff in there. And I think that is something that has to do with ego. And I'm not saying ego necessarily as in a negative way, but I mean, it's like, I want to stand out. I want to have something that people will admire. That people will say, oh, you could do that. That's admirable. I think it's that, I mean, it's a certain amount of pride in what you have created. Because when you make a shirt and everybody goes, oh, Walter, I love that shirt and love those colors in that. How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel good. And yeah, I can understand that. There's a lot of people that are looking for recognition.
Yeah.
And they want to maybe produce a unique product to sell.
Yeah.
And
they want to make their name
they have their
known.
booth, and people want to buy their products, and they get really into the fact that they're being
stroked.
Yeah, that people
With each
are
sale, they're being
giving them
stroked.
recognition.
Yeah. And everybody likes that. I mean, I like it when people, well, why do I post pictures of the quilts that I've made? Because I want to hear the nice comments out of it all. You want to break my heart? Say something negative about one of my quilts. Kind of a deal. So, I understand that. And that's maybe why people have these booths and things, because I really don't believe anybody as an individual who makes all these little handcrafted things that they do, really are supplementing their income in any major way, because it's just, you'd have to sell a large
Or maybe
volume.
they're using it as a tax dodge too.
Well, maybe. Okay, well, that's the other thing. So that takes us to, okay, let's say we want to set up a business. How will we go about it? How do we get the word out there that we're doing something? Well, a lot of people go to Etsy, and I've heard there's a lot, or eBay. I've heard there's a lot of problems with Etsy. That Etsy takes a fairly large percentage of whatever you're selling an item for to pay them, and I think there's other costs involved too. Now, I don't know much about Etsy. I kind of looked into it once a long time ago, but I decided it was way too much effort for what I wanted to do or what I was thinking of doing at the time, so I let it go. But I have heard of a lot of people have had problems with Etsy for many, many reasons. Well, that's one way. I suppose because I have a YouTube channel, I could advertise what we make on the YouTube channel. But how do you get payment for that? You got to set up a payment system. So you can go through PayPal. PayPal takes some money from you for that. Well, any system you set up is going to take some when they're handling money for you. Shopify. Now, Shopify has a system where for an individual that doesn't have a retail store, you can go through them. They have a fairly slick system for helping you out with that, but you have to pay them a fee. And I'm not sure how that fee works, whether it's a monthly charge or whether it's based on what you sell or a combination of the two. Probably a combination of the two. So you could set up your own private website, but how do you get word out that you have these things that you're selling? I mean, how many people know about my YouTube channel? And I've been on YouTube for over 10 years with a channel. My subscriptions tell you.
Now, if you make something and you get your name like Gucci.
Well, yeah, but how did Gucci get their name?
Yeah.
They had PR people. When they started, they had clever advertising. They, the whole, we associate things like Gucci and
then you can, then your bags become profitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your bags become extremely designer. But how much fabric and the quality of it, I mean, everybody says, oh, they're great quality and a whole bit. Well, yeah, they should be when you're paying what you're paying for a Gucci bag or a Coach bag or any of those other ones that are out there. Prada.
Well, if you can charge several $1,000s for a bag, you can put some pretty premium materials into them.
Yeah, but they're I think it's more or less, it's the status, because they have somehow found a way when they got started to create a branding. They call it branding now, where it's recognized as, ooh, if you've got a Gucci bag, you've arrived. It's that.
That's
now.
Status symbol.
That didn't happen overnight for those companies, and they've had a lot of high-end advertisements and things like that the average person can't go. So what do you rely on? Word of mouth, basically. Yeah. And in things like what we make, let's face it, what we make's a dime a dozen. There's many quilters out there, and many sewists out there that make shirts and pants and garments and all kinds of stuff like that.
Now, mind you, like certain garments and stuff, or special garments and stuff like that, are not really readily available to the average person, right?
Well, no. Well, another reason people might come to you or to anybody who does clothes manufacturing, like there's a lady in our area here that I taught with her. She's retired. She is a seamstress. She taught that in school as well as other things. But she has made wedding dresses over the years for people as well. But when people go to somebody like a seamstress to make a special gown or a wedding dress or something like that, they're going to them because they think they're going to get a better price than going to into a wedding boutique kind of place and buying a wedding dress off of that. I don't think they're necessarily getting that much of a discount because if anybody who does that kind of sewing, it's meticulous sewing and it takes a lot of hours and you're going to be paying for it there too. So really, okay, so if you're going to set up a business, you got to figure out, one, how to get the word out there that you have a business. You've got to develop a clientele. That takes effort. That takes time. You just don't throw something up on internet and expect to have customers. You've got to market yourself, and that takes time and effort.
Well, no, I see a lot of people look at you and say, "Oh, well, you like to sew quilts and all other stuff, and why don't you sell them or something like that?" Why don't you,
well, yeah, and I've had many people say that.
And then they find out you have a long arm, and they say, "Well, why don't you rent time on it? Why don't you sell it to rent time or sell it to?"
And that was a comment that we got from actually quite a few people when we first announced that we were getting a long arm. And they're saying, well, are you going to rent it out? Or are you going to do custom quilting for people? And we've discussed this before, why we're not doing that. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But people automatically, because you've invested a lot of money into a very major piece of equipment, assume that you're going to try to recoup your costs by making it make money for you. No.
That's sort of like me saying, I want to buy a fancy car, so I can't really afford the car or whatever, or I can't justify buying the car, so I'm going to rent my car out to people that like to drive it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so.
For X number of dollars, that sort of thing. People don't think about doing that.
No.
So why should you think about doing renting out your long arm?
Now, another person made a comment this past week to me about going to businesses and selling quilts to businesses, or places that they need decor in their lobbies. And yes, I have seen very elaborate art quilts in the lobbies of, big business buildings and things like that. But the reason they're buying those quilts is they're not buying. What am I going to do? Walk into a business with an armful of quilts and go, "Hi, you want to buy a quilt?" No, I think I'll be ushered out onto the street very quickly.
A lot of times, those quilts are actually considered art pieces.
Yeah, so they're art pieces. They may have won awards. They may have been in major installations in museums or in shows or something. That person has developed a name. And they have just somehow they've gotten the word out there that this might be available for, $10,000-$20,000 or whatever for it. I don't think I'm in that market whatsoever. Again, though, that takes effort. How did those people get known? Like, it's just like an artist. There's many, many people that are artists out there, and they don't make a dime off what they've sold, and they've been in the business for years. So what makes the difference? Well, if someone comes along or somebody who is somebody buys somebody's work of art, and now it becomes known because, well, if this Rockefeller type bought that for whatever, this person must be really good. And then everybody else gets on the bandwagon and wants some of their work as well. Like, look at Banksy. Banksy. He did graffiti on streets. But somebody decided, and he did things, he got his name out there because he did some outrageous pieces of art.
And political comments.
But nobody would have heard of him if it hadn't been that he hit the news. He got in the papers, and he milked that. He was clever, or he had clever people with him on this journey, and they figured out a way to suddenly make him a household name. Notoriety with it all. Andy Warhol's art is not great art if you really look at it. They called it pop art. He's the father of pop art because
But he
he
didn't really
painted
get-
Campbell's soup cans in Marilyn Monroe. And and they're prints. They're not paintings per se in that. Like, he did do some paintings and stuff, but he also had a personality. He hung out at and was outrageous in the circles that he traveled in, and it was the right time too for all of that to get his name out there. But really, when you look at his art, it isn't a masterpiece. We're not talking Da Vinci here, or Monet, or Renoir, or Van Gogh, or Picasso. Even Picasso, he didn't happen overnight, but somebody came along and saw his work, and it was somebody who knew somebody who could make him into somebody. And that, so that's how art happens. And quilting is an art, and garment sewing is an art. Garment sewing, if you do something that could become trendy, like right now, there's a combination of our two sewing abilities. Apparently, quilted clothing is coming back into fashion. It's not a new idea. It's been around.
Clowns have been wearing them for years.
Yeah, really. But now it's becoming trendy again. So, if you want to make money from that, you'd have to get right on the trend now, because trends come and they go. So what might be hot right now this year, you'd want to capitalize upon that, because 2 years down the road, nobody's going to want a quilted vest or whatever clown outfit, whatever with it. Even clowns have their style. So, yeah. So somebody suggested, so this whole thing came to my mind because somebody was saying what other things you could do. I was saying, my quilts are piling up. And I still like making them, so I'm going to continue, but they're piling up. And somebody suggested giving them away, donating them, to charities. Charities will often, want something like that to raffle off. I know in the guild I used to belong to, we donated quilts for various charities, and some of them were taken by charities and they auctioned them off. They raffled them off to make money for a charity. And I thought about that idea, but how do you do that? Do you walk into a charity and go, "Hi, I quilt. You want a quilt?" Kind of a thing. You're donating it. And then if you heard that only 10 tickets were sold on a raffle for it, that'd make you feel bad out of it all as well. I mean, we've been to silent auctions for like our local art museum and things like that. And sometimes you get a piece of art at a ridiculously low price because it was a silent auction. Nobody else wanted it. So, like I got a Carmichael, a print of a Carmichael. Carmichael is a Canadian. I'm one of the members of what they called the Group of Seven in Canada, probably our most famous group of painters that painted around the turn of the last century in the early 1900s, the 1920s. And I put a bid in. It was a silent auction. They said it was valued at $300. I got it for $125. And that was with the frame and everything. And it's a nice frame too. And it's a nice print. And it's like a limited print as well. So, I got it for $125. It's worth a lot more than that. So, who knows? So you donate something off and people buy 10 raffle tickets. That'll make you feel like crap. And whoever donated that painting or that print and the whole bit with the frame and everything, they must have felt a little bit disappointed. They were probably hoping it would raise more for the charity than it did. So anyways, I think the bottom line is why I wouldn't start a business doing this, besides of all the complications we talked about, is as soon as it becomes a business, it's no longer fun. And I'm in this.
Then I'll have to do another hobby.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But you wouldn't have time to do anything else if you're trying to make this into a business.
Yeah.
Because that's all you'd be doing. And I'm retired. And I don't need the money. Not like that. With it.
Well, it's always nice to have extra money.
Well, it's always nice, but there's
it's not.
I'll
To
fill
me,
my
to
body
me,
on the
to
street.
me, it's a hard job for me to do for making money.
Well, you mean it's a hard job if you were to do it for making money?
Yeah, I think for the amount of return that you would get monetarily, for me, if it was just strictly money and not, like recognition, um, I don't think I would. I don't think I would make enough money doing it.
Oh, I know I wouldn't make enough money doing it.
So, um,
I'm a fast
and then
quilter,
it becomes
but not that fast.
then it becomes a chore, right?
Yeah.
To put out products and try and sell them, and some stuff probably wouldn't sell, and then it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing this. I'm sort of sewing clothing and stuff like that because it's an interest I have, and it's and that's all it is. And it's not. I don't really want to make it into a business. It's not something that I would ever. Even I did stained glass there for a while, and I did it for my own enjoyment. I didn't really want to sell pieces or anything like that. Not like my friend tried to do or whatever. So, and even the lady that used to own the stained glass store, the amount of return that she got for her, she did commissions and things like that, and the amount of hours of work that she would have to put into for a commission, the return was very little.
Yeah.
And the one nice thing about she was a store owner, so she could buy all of her materials at cost.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
wholesale.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So when it's no longer, when it doesn't become fun anymore, then it becomes stressful. And we're retired. We don't need that kind of stress. We don't need another job out of it all. So yeah, so I don't think we're going to be having.
If I really
starting a
wanted to
business.
make some more money, I could go work for Home Depot for a while.
Yeah, there was something else I thought about too when you were talking again, and it went right out of my mind, and I forgot what it was. It was like this whole idea with people.
And not only that, what about if somebody complains about what you've got?
Well, that's the thing. Like, okay.
Or you made a mistake here.
Well, we've heard our local long armor. She has a business and she does customization, and she has told us some horror stories that she's had to deal with. Like when somebody, coming back to quilting, when somebody said, "Well, you could quilt people with the long arm. You could do other people's quilts and that." Well, first of all, I'm not good enough for that kind of thing because people would expect perfection and absolute beauty. But Tracy at Whirls and Swirls does it, but her stuff is perfection and it is beauty because she knows what she's doing and she does it very, very well. And that's because she's had lots of practice and lots of experience. It didn't just happen overnight.
But I remember we were in the store one day, it was a couple of years ago or whatever, and she was doing a quilt for somebody else, and she had it on the machine, and she was using a computer for it to do the quilting, and then all of a sudden the seams started falling apart.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That if the quilt is not constructed properly and seams come out, then you've got a whole new ball game. Because if that happened to me, and it has happened to me since I got Lucy on one of my quilts, but I could fix it for myself, but I didn't fix it well enough for somebody else, and because I don't hand sew. And you really have to hand sew to get in there because you've got all the layers. And if this happens when you're halfway through the quilting process, you go, "Oh, crap, what do I do now?" And she's talked about the fact that people come in and they have this, it's like going to a hairdresser, they bring in a picture and go, "Hi, I want that," and they think they're going to look like that model. And the hairdresser's trying to gently tell them, really, that's not going to look right on you and the whole bit. And then you've got this thing, they insist, and then they're not happy with the end result, and they blame you. Well, the same with doing somebody's quilt as well. She told us about recommending to one lady a certain color scheme, a certain pattern, but no, this person had their mind set that they wanted this, and she explained why she would not be probably happy with the results if she went that particular route and didn't take her advice. And that what she had to put up with. And was that really worth the money that she made from it? I don't think so, because she wasn't getting paid $20,000 for doing this. So, that's what you have to put up with if you start with a business, because the customer is always right. Even if they are an a-hole, they're always right. You give the customer what they want. Because if you don't, if you argue with them, if you try to reason with them, if they go away from you and go, well, fine, I'm not dealing with you or whatever, they badmouth you to everybody else. Say, oh, I wouldn't
And they
deal
go on
with that.
social media.
That's right. And so,
say,
you see?
don't go to this place. It's a terrible place to go to.
And so, yeah. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to be starting a business anytime soon. In fact, not at all. I'm not doing a business. So
I don't want the hassle.
I will make quilts for other people, but they're people I know, their friends or their family, and I think I will just give it to them. Or if anything, have them, if they want to commission me, they pay for the fabric, but they don't pay for my time and effort or anything like that. I just give it to them with it. So, yeah. And one thing too is, if you give a quilt or a shirt or a garment or something to somebody you know really, really well, and you're giving it to them, it's free. If there is a fault in it, they're not going to bring it up to you, because they realize that you made it for them out of the goodness of your heart. And they would have to be a real pig to bitch about that. So,
And it's like, I'm never going to give you anything else again.
Yeah. And, I've heard this come from quilters. I've heard these stories before. There was a lady in the guild whose son owned a brewery, had opened up his own brewery and the whole bit. And she thought what would be nice as a opening, new business gift was she made him a customized quilt that had the name of his brewery on it. It had beer cans and stuff. She spent a lot of time and a lot of thought on the quilt. And it sounded like it was a great quilt. And this person was an experienced quilter. Well, I ran into her son. Just a coincidence. I didn't know who her son was or anything like that. But he happened to be at something that I was at as well. And he was giving samples of his beer out and things like that. And I said to him, yeah, I said, I've met your mother. I said, how did you like the quilt that she made you? He turned around and said, and this was his mother that made it for him. He said, yeah, not really my style. I thought, did you tell your mother that after she gave it to you? And I said, well, I asked him, did you hang it up in your... no, that's what he said. I asked him, I said, did you hang it up in the brewery? I figured he'd be all tickled pink. His mother made this for him. It's a unique quilt and the whole bit. He went, no, it's really not my style. Okay. I know how proud your mother was of making that, because she talked about it at the guild and the whole bit, but I didn't say any of that to him. Oh, okay. Fine. So.
Yes. Now the dog's...
It's probably a dog's blanket. Yeah. With it all. But anyways, those were just sort of our thoughts on all this. And the reason I want to talk about it this week is because many of you have given me ideas about what I can do with my surplus quilts and things like that. And others of you have mentioned the whole idea of a business and whatnot. And some have mentioned it on our
there's a lot of people that
are
fascinated about the, quilting process and what quilts look like in there. And other people could care less.
Yeah. So choose who you give your gifts to. This goes with anything that you make.
I've had people say to me in the past about, if I make my own shirt or garment or something, I didn't make this shirt, but a garment or something, they would say to me, well, why would you want to do that? Well, obviously, because I want to make something that isn't a check like this off the rack one.
Well, there's two kinds of people in the world. There are makers and there are buyers. Okay? People make because they like to make, whatever it is, whether they make art, paint, knit, crochet, quilt, sew, whatever they do, because they enjoy the process more than anything else. I do. That's why I quilt. I enjoy the process of doing it. When I'm done a quilt, it's done. It's goes somewhere and sits on a table. That's what I mean. I shouldn't grow too attached to them, because it's not like I'm rolling around on the floor in them all the time, and kind of a deal. I mean, if it brought me joy making it. If I can give it to somebody else and it gives them joy having it, then it's a win-win. Okay. So anyways, I think that's enough of this discussion.
Yeah.
For now. So we've exhausted it.
Yeah, I know. We can go on for days.
Yeah, and we do. So anyways, if you have thoughts on what we're talking about today, feel free to put them in the comments below. And we do read all the comments. We don't always write a comment to the comment, because we could be here for days for it. And sometimes it's just, yeah, you've said it all in the comment. What more can we add to it? So that's it for this episode of So Chatty, and hope to see you next week for our next one. No idea what we'll be talking about then, but then again, we never have any idea what we're going to talk about. It's just so chatty. So have a good week, and we'll see you all next week. Bye for now.
Bye.